Alright, welcome back to my series of tutorial tool videos for EVE Online. I am Agandre, and I thought about what I was going to cover, and I thought about starting the new player experience, or NPE. But then I thought about all the new guys in the help channel, all the new guys that come to Wall of Astoria and Noobs, New Beginnings, of things that they ask. And there have been a lot of questions about character creation. Not so much how to make your character and how to make it pretty, but we start off with the one part of they think this is World of Warcraft, where if you join a race that's in a war against another race, then that means you can't go to their space. And that is not the truth in EVE Online. In EVE Online, the only thing that determines if you're a target by the enemy is your security status, which even your own nation will shoot you if you're a criminal, or your standings, your reputation with the other nations. If you're a Glenteigh, which in most cases from the people I hear, they've chosen to be Glenteigh because of freedom, to find out that they've joined a corporation that's operating out of Caldari space, and now all of a sudden they're afraid that, oh, well, I have to leave corporation because you're in Caldari space. No, you don't have to leave corporation because race does not matter. Race only matters what you start with. Outside of what you start with, you can go anywhere, do anything. Any race can learn any tank, any starship, and any weapon and go anywhere. You'll find Minmatar pilots flying in Amarr space and a Glenteigh starship using railguns and blasters and missioning for the Amarr. And there's no problem with that, except for, role players will still see you as a Matari slave that has gotten out of his pen. In this video, what we're going to cover is we are going to cover the 4 empires, starships, a couple of their capabilities, weapons, weapon specifics, and tanks. So how you deal damage, how you may apply different effects, how you may take damage, and how these apply to the specific races of starships. But again, no one race is limited to just their ships. I am an Intaki of the Glenteigh Federation, and I can fly every starship, use every weapon, and I can armor tank and shield tank, and even in my hangar somewhere back up in Caldari space, I have a certificate for hull tanking. It's a funny thing that EVE Online did, that CCP did, when they did certificates to rate your training, which now you have a training per starship. You have a level per starship that you can pursue if you wish to be perfect in a starship. Those will take very long times to accomplish, but it is possible if you specify on that stuff. You may join EVE Online, think that the big bad battleships and capital ships is where it's at, and then you may decide a battleship is too slow for your liking. You're not going to go past cruiser. in which case then you have frigates of Tech 1 and Tech 2 capabilities, destroyers of Tech 1, 2, and 3 capability, and cruisers of Tech 1, 2, and 3 capability that all fill important roles and are fun to be in. And we will cover each nation's primaries of character creation, not so much on how to be pretty, but if you've already made an Amarian, you don't have to delete your character because, well, now you want the big guns, or you want to shield tank. You can still train into a Caldari ship, has an Amarian to shield tank, and use one of the gunships for 425 millimeters, or train in the Mimitar for the 1400s. It's whatever you choose. You can choose to be a very unique starship if you find how to fit it right. There are ships in the game that do not have weapon bonuses, and because they do not have weapon bonuses, they have been outfitted completely different from the race. And we will cross that, especially when we get to the Amarians, because that's where the big centers of that is. And we will save Mimitar for last, because Mimitar is considered the hardest race in the game to specialize in. And I say this because it's true. They have ships that do everything. Although they don't have a ship bonus for drones until capital ships. But they do have a lot of ships with drone bays, a lot of ships with missiles, a lot of ships geared towards guns, ships geared towards armor tanks, ships geared towards shield tanks, and they have very fast ships. So we will start with the Caldari. As you look at the Caldari, you'll see that, like most TV series, movies that have spaceships, the Caldari are very reminiscent of what those shows portray. You have the gray angular armor plating of the ships. Their armor is actually very thin for this race. But then again, so are many sci-fi shows, because your protection is the shields. And we will cover that in the next segment with the weapons here. The Caldari, they use missiles, they use railguns, they use blasters. They have ships in every line specialized towards signal jamming. Signal jamming is this guy right here. This is your first one, the frigate. Specialized to signal jam, which will cause an enemy to drop their lock. And when an enemy can't lock you, they generally can't do damage. There's exceptions to that. Very few exceptions. Exceptions such as drones. But that's okay, you jam the main enemy, then you have drones to deal with, so you focus on the drones while the main ship still can't fire. No big deal. And then you have auto-targeting missiles. Those I like. And the proper way of using them, they're very hard to learn to use, but if you learn to use them right, auto-targeting missiles will fire on the closest hostile target. I have used these in PvE and PvP, and in PvP, I have been called a hacker, because apparently they didn't know about these things. You will, and you'll probably disregard it, unless you get jammed a lot, but that'll be later down the road. So for Caldari, we have missiles, lots of missiles. Missiles is a very direct damage weapon. And by direct, I mean in the way of you have different size missiles. You have 2 for every ship. You have a close range and a long range. Close range is like for frigates, you have rockets, and in long range, you have standard missiles. For the middle ships, cruisers, battle cruisers, you have heavy missiles and heavy assault missiles. For the battleships, you get torpedoes and cruise missiles. Your torpedoes being close, your long range being cruise missiles. And then you get into the capital classes, which has a extra large torpedo, extra large cruise missile. Of all those missiles, they're all split into 4 types: a thermal, an EM, an explosive, and a kinetic. They are the one weapon system that you can focus all of a damage type into. All the other weapon systems are split, with hybrids doing 2 types, lasers doing 2 types, and one of the projectile turrets, ammo rounds, doing 3 types. Missiles only do 1 type. One thing about missiles is the only thing they care about when it comes to range is max range. If you have a missile that standard missiles do between 20 to 40 kilometers. I have a ship that does just over 40 kilometers with standard missiles. As long as the enemy is within those 40 kilometers, those missiles will hit every time. But from the time I press F1 to the time it has to travel, there's some delayed damage though, because it has to travel, and people don't like that. A lot of people do not like that. I have seen people complain about, well, if they fire their missiles from too long, they waste an extra 8 seconds because they have to recycle in order to fire again, and that missile salvo just went to waste. I don't know if it's a money thing, I think it's a time thing, but I've seen people get upset over wasting 1 salvo of missiles. The Caldari, if you don't like missiles, the Caldari also has a range of gunships at every tier. We have a cruiser, we have a frigate, we have a destroyer, a battle cruiser, a battleship, all geared towards guns, specifically hybrids. Railguns and blasters. Railguns are your long range, blasters are your short range, very high damage, but unlike missiles, they do 2 damages. A railgun will do kinetic damage and thermal damage. So you don't have all your eggs in one basket, which any enemy, almost any enemy, I say almost any enemy because both the Serpentis and the Gristas pirates and the Federation Navy and Caldari Navy are all weak to both kinetic and thermal, more of kinetic than thermal. But yeah, outside of that, your enemies are only against thermal damage, and they have a resist against kinetic, so it cuts down some of your damage. Not a big deal though. It is one of the better gun systems in the game, especially when dealing with close range. The Caldari shield tank. Like most futuristic ideas of starships, you have shields. They take all the damage using active shield boosters. Shield boosters can work very fast. They start their repair at the very start of the cycle, instantly transferring capacitor into the shields. And there is a passive way to do it, and that is using lots of slots on your ship to give yourself bigger shields, to install modules that shift power from your reactor straight to your shields. Your capacitor charges slower, but now your shields are charging a lot faster. That can be a twist on things too. With active shield boosting, generally the shield booster uses more capacitor than a armor repair system. And on some systems, depending on your skills, depending on ship bonuses, it can be one point of cap for 1 hit point of shield regenerated. There are better modules that change that to, like, for 1 cap, you get 1 point something points of shield regeneration, plus skills, plus ship bonus, and that sort of stuff. Missiles only care about the size of the enemy and how fast they go. Guns, on the other hand, have to care about what direction and relevance to your ship the enemy is flying. If you have an enemy doing 1,000 meters a second, completely perpendicular to your ship, your guns are barely going to scathe it. But if you get that little frigate that's doing 1,000 meters a second to come straight at you, you nullify the effect of the angular velocity, the ship traveling from right to left, left to right, because now it's coming straight for you. And now also the signature doesn't matter so much because the ship's not moving. I have hit small frigates with very large guns and destroyed them in both PvE and PvP. When I use guns, fun tactic of mine is to kite. When I kite, I nullify having to track them, and that also nullifies the guns don't care how fast they're moving or how small they are at that point. And then it's just a volley and they're dead. So, for the Caldari state, there's a few things you can do dealing with empires. All these empires have a faction warfare. All these empires have missions. If you faction warfare, that is PvP, player versus player. Joining that, you will pledge allegiance to your empire and to the ally empire. The ally of the Caldari, when you do the faction warfare, is the Amarr. And your enemies will be the Gallente and the Minmatar. If you do missions with the Caldari, you will flavor all the pirates. All the empires will send you against all the pirates. But the Caldari will not send you to attack Mordu Legion, who is like a neutral pirate. They're not pirates, they're mercenaries. But if you go in mission for the Gallente or the Minmatar, they will send you against Mordu Legion. So you have an added pirate added in to the other nations that's not in the Caldari. Missioning with the Caldari, a lot of times when they give you an anti-empire mission that will hurt your standings and make you red to half the galaxy of empire, they like to send you against the Gallente. But they will also occasionally, very rarely, send you against the Minmatar, because their whole beef is they don't like the Gallente. It's too much freedom for them. If you do missions, PvE, if you go into asteroid belts, if you go to combat anomalies in Caldari space, you will fight the Guristas pirates. These pirates love to signal jam, and they love to cheat with signal jamming. A frigate will perma-jam your battleship. By the time you finally go, okay, good, they're done jamming, I can lock now. Depending on what you're locking, determines if you get a shot off or not. And then you're jammed all over again. But they will send you against Angels, Sancha, Blood Raider, Serpentis, all the empires against all the pirates. There's a few side factions with the empires that a certain empire will not, like Mordu Legion. Whereas, on the other hand, the Minmatar have the Thukker tribe, and the Caldari will send you to kill Thukker tribe. But that's only every now and then. So, that is the first race. They are considered PvE easy mode. Missiles are great for PvE. You can choose your damage and just volley stuff off the field. And you can sit there and tank it off. So next we will cover the Gallente. They are the opposite of Caldari and their enemy. And Caldari ships are so much better to look at. They're rounded, they're not angular like the Caldari. The Gallente ships are just look like they've grown. They also hold the largest Tech 1 industrial in the game, called the Iteron Mark V. If you want to get into trading, this is your ship. This is the Space Trucker. The Gallente deal is railguns, blasters, and drones, and a armor tank. So, Gallente weapons. Their short-range weapons are blasters. Their long-range weapons are railguns. The downside to these, unlike missiles, is you still have the enemy's signature getting in your way. How small is the ship compared to your guns? If you're using big guns, you don't want to be wasting time shooting at a frigate unless you really need to kill that frigate. How fast the ship is moving in accordance to your ship. Angular velocity. This makes them very hard to hit, as the gun has to move in order to hit the target. And the guns don't worry about speed too much, because the speed is mixed in with angular velocity, unlike missiles. Missiles don't have angular velocity, it's sheer size and speed. But if a ship is moving against you, depending on how fast that ship goes, if a ship is going 100 meters a second from left to right of your ship, you stand up far better chance hitting it. But if that ship is moving at 1,000 meters a second, oh, you're going to have problems hitting it unless you make it decide to change course. It can still go 1,000 meters a second, but when that ship is going 1,000 meters a second straight for you, your guns don't have to worry about tracking now. Your guns can now hit that little frigate and pop it. The Gallente have a second weapon system that they love to combine on all their ships. Almost all their ships. is drones, and almost all their ships have drone bays. I say this because some ships don't have drone bays. Mostly it's stuff like freighters. There's actually an industrial, a hauling ship, with a drone bay now. So interesting things can happen with that. Anytime in EVE, when there's a new ship made that's never before been seen because CCP has given us this new ship, one of two things happen. You have a group of people that look and go, how can we use this to kill people? And then you have a group of people that's waiting to be the first ones to kill that ship. It happens every time. It's like a contest. The Gallente are armor tankers. They have boost for armor. Armor is your second level of defense. It is slower to repair than shields. It's more economical for your capacitor though. Armor reps always use less capacitor but heal more HP per capacitor point spent. The downside is when you need to repair in a hurry. With shields you can manually decide when you want to pulse your shields. And you get that healing, that repair to your shields as soon as you hit the button. The armor rep, on the other hand, you may have to wait a few seconds. In the case of a large armor rep, somewhere between 8 to 9 seconds before your hit points come up. So by the time you press that repair button, your enemy probably sent another salvo or two into the side of your ship. Shields, I forgot to cover, are great against kinetic and explosive weapons. They don't do so well against thermal and EM weapons. That's because thermal and EM is energy based, so they apply more to shields. You can cover that up with hardeners. Armor also has their own hardeners. Does great against energy based attacks, i.e. thermal and EM damages. But kinetic and explosive is what you want to avoid, because they apply more damage to your ship, and again there are hardeners for that to take less damage and make the damage a lot easier to repair. With railguns and blasters, the guns can only hold so much ammo. Missiles can only hold so much ammo in their launchers. And then you have a cycle for reloading. And we will eventually, after this race, we'll do Amarr next. And Amarr is a different playing field with their guns. So we got blasters and railguns. Drones. Drones are these little flying robots that, in the hands of Gallente pilots, of Gallente ships, they will tear someone up. While the railguns may be limited in damage to kinetic and thermal damage, there is a set of drones of different sizes that do different damages. Because all four races have developed a drone of every size. Small, medium, large, fighters. And each race drone does different damages. For instance, Gallente developed the Hobgoblin small drone. It does thermal damage. The Caldari developed a drone, kinetic damage. Let me rephrase that. The Gallente does thermal damage. The Caldari does kinetic damage. The Amarrians do EM damage. And the Minmatar drones do explosive damage. There are special, more expensive drones. There are faction drones that do 2 damages, and some do more, like the Gecko. The Gecko is a super expensive special drone, considered an extra large drone, and it does damage to every type. But in doing so, this drone is extremely expensive, and you can only deploy a limited number of them because they're so large. Faction warfare for the Gallente, which is again player versus player PvP. They will have you going into mostly Caldari space. They can have you go into a Mars space. Those are your enemies. Your ally will be Minmatar. You'll pair up with the Minmatar pilots and you'll go wreck Caldari and Amarr. If you do missions, many of these missions, when it comes to anti-Empire, the Gallente will send you against Caldari. Occasionally, they will send you against Amarr. When they send you against Caldari, they can also send you against the Caldari sub-faction, Mordu Legion, and possibly the Amarr sub-factions, Khanids or Amatar. And being in Gallente space, you will face Separatist pirates in the belts and the combat anomalies. Separatist pirates love to sensor dampen you. Sensor dampening increases your lock time and decreases your lock range. You will have a battleship capable of 90 kilometers that can't target past 10 kilometers until you kill the sensor dampeners. All in all, Gallente is generally a very large used race because of drones. Drones in enough numbers will wreck entire fleets without even trying. And they're really good in PvP. There are videos on YouTube of a number of people that go out and they PvP in stuff like a T1 Vexor, which is a Gallente drone cruiser, and they tear people up. In the right hands, I've seen 2 pilots out in 0-0 lawless space take on an entire fleet until they eventually died, but they killed a lot of people, a lot more than 20 million in 2 cruisers, by using autocannons and drones. Next, we will go to the Amarrians, the religious zealots of the galaxy. Their claim to fame is lasers, Nosferatu, and capacitor neutralizers. And now they have some ships that are armored ships with missiles and drones. And also their claim to fame is they're the slowest ships in the galaxy and the heaviest armored ships that there are. I have seen Amarr starships get stripped of their shields in a heartbeat, half their armor falls, and then their armor just stops. It's like you just hit a brick wall with 7 people shooting this guy, and their armor just stops falling. So we will go to weapons. And we have a quad laser turret opening up for us. So lasers. You have 2 kinds of lasers. Pulse lasers are your close range rapid firing lasers. They don't seem to do a whole lot of damage to me, but that may be because I'm not accounting for the fact that they fire so quick. They are very, very fast firing lasers, is what pulse lasers are. And then you have your beam lasers. Your beam lasers are your long range. They take longer to fire. They hit a lot harder. Bonuses to lasers: you don't have to haul around 10,000 rounds of ammo. If you're going into combat, you don't have to worry about your guns running out of ammo and having to reload for 5 seconds, because when you slide in a crystal, that crystal stays. If your enemy changes range, you change crystals, it happens in an instant and you're ready to start firing again. If you're using faction crystals and Tech 2 crystals and they break in the middle of combat, as soon as they break, a new one slides in and you can start firing again. That is the nice thing about lasers. There is no need to reload. There is no need to carry thousands of rounds of ammo, like missiles or railguns or projectiles. Usually in a mission with missiles, I need at least 2,000 missiles on my Tech 1 ships to get through a mission. Sometimes 3,000. But for lasers, all I need is one set of crystals with how I need to know to play my ship. If I want to change the range of my lasers, I need to know all of the different laser crystals, whereas multi-frequency is your close range crystal. It halves your range by 50% or so, and radio is your very long range crystal. The downside to lasers is they are damage locked like railguns, EM and thermal damage only. The shorter the range, the more thermal damage you do. The longer the range, the more EM damage you use. And because of that fact, if you change a crystal from multi-frequency to radio or anywhere in between, you do less thermal damage, more EM damage. There are several different types of crystals, and the way these crystals are used, they're used to modify the range on your guns. So when you know your gun, when you know your crystals, you'll instinctively know exactly what crystal to switch to, when you need to switch to it in order to keep applying damage. And that is the lasers' claim to fame, is for that you don't have to worry about a reload like other races. Other races, if I want to change the range of my gun, I'm going to have to stop firing, tell it to load a new magazine from like antimatter to iridium hybrid charges, and I have to wait 5 seconds for the railguns to load before I can start firing while the enemy is still firing at me. With lasers, I can go from multi-frequency to ultraviolet like that in a heartbeat and immediately start firing. The lasers will use a lot of capacitor. Many times people complain about just the lasers will suck a ship's capacitor dry. Just having the fire lasers, that's all it takes, and I'm at a capacitor. They are very hard to establish capacitor to run both lasers and a tank, but it can be done. I've done it. I do it in missions where I use laser ships. So it's possible. Don't let people get you down if you want to go pew pew lasers. And the armor tank, just like the Glente. great against EM and thermal, weak against kinetic and explosive. The Amarr generally have more hit points in armor compared to the Gallente, because they have heavier armor tanks. But because of the extra armor hit points, they are slower than any of the other ship's sisters. So if you're in a fleet with a Minmatar and a Caldari and a Gallente, and you're all like the same tier battleship, you're going to be dragging behind. The Minmatar, though, he's going to be smoking everybody. And we will cross that when we get to the Minmatar, which will be next. The Amarr do have armored ships now that use both drones and missile systems. So if you're still partial of, I want drones, but I want a big gold shiny ship, and I want to use missiles, then the Amarr is your choice. As for the people, if you join faction warfare, you will fight the Minmatar and the Gallente. The Caldari will be your allies. What I don't like here is they're saying that the enemy of the Amarr for the pirates is just the Blood Raiders. But that is not true. The Amarr Empire has the largest base in Empire. They have like 3 separate regions to them, because they covered a couple other races during the wars, the Ammatar and the Khanid, who have their own systems, their own regions. But since they belong to the Amarr, that expand the Amarr Empire to such a huge area. And in doing so, they have the Blood Raiders and the Sancha Pirates, depending on where you go. The Blood Raiders, though, if you're running missions, that's going to be your #1 enemy between Blood Raider and Sancha. The Blood Raiders like to kill your capacitor with neutralizers and Nosferatus. The Sancha like to make it to where you can hardly fire past the range of your guns in order to hit a target, because they use turret destabilizers. These turret destabilizers, they kill your optimal range, they kill your fall off range, and they make your turrets super slow. In order to hit anything while under the effects of the Sancha Nation electronic warfare, you need to get right up against the enemy, chasing them down, and fire into their backside. With the Blood Raiders, you want to keep your distance, because the last thing you want to do is not pay attention, having the Nosferatus and neutralizers get in range, and in a couple of hits, your capacitor is empty, your tank stops, your lasers stop firing, and you die. For our last segment, we will cover the most complicated race in the game. And like I said at the beginning, I say this because it's true. Minmatar Minmatar. Their claim to fame is the fastest ships and the largest guns in the game. Any of their ships are faster than their baseline counterparts of the other empires. And they have, even their autocannons, they have autocannons for close range, 425mm autocannons, and they have 1400mm artillery cannons for your battleships. Oh no, wait, the autocannons are 800s. 425 is a battlecruiser module, which goes great on the Hurricane, and the 425s eat interceptors. So we will go to the weapon systems, which are old school. They're probably reliant on a electronic firing mechanism, but it's still a gun. It's still load the big shell in, pull the trigger, and the shell flies out and smacks into the other ship. Autocannons, they're your close range guns. They fire very fast. They are very short range. But they have a good fall off. And they track fast. Where I was talking about the 425s being good on a Hurricane, I have heard of numerous times of interceptor pilots who get out there and their whole job is to tackle the fleet, make sure the enemy ships don't move anywhere while the rest of the fleet shoots the ship. And I have heard many stories of interceptor pilots dying to Minmatar battlecruisers called the Hurricanes that have 425mm autocannons. And not because the interceptor got too close. They would be doing several thousand meters a second at like 20 kilometers. But because of the range, the guns were able to track and destroy the interceptor. So they're great if you're going against fast-moving targets. Artillery. As John Mork says in Clear Skies, stationary targets don't react well to 1400s. Artillery tracks very slowly, but you're moving a giant gun that fires a shell about around 5 feet 8 inches, 5 feet 9 inches in diameter. You might as well be firing a short bus into the cockpit of the opposite ship. The downside of artillery cannons, they take forever to cycle. Also, it is near impossible to fit a whole rack of 1400s on a battleship and have a tank. 1200s, you can do a full rack and a tank, no problem. But 1400s is where it's at, and no matter what you do, when you fit this ship, the DPS always looks abysmal. Well, that's because the DPS isn't telling you am low because you have a 17-second reload time. If you look at an artillery cannon without fitting it to a ship, which kind of scared me the other day when I fit up a 1400 and I didn't pay attention to the guns say I have a 40-second reload time. When I fire a bullet, in order for another round to get into place, it's going to take 40 seconds. But when I fit it to my ship, because of my skills and because of the ship bonuses, I only need 17 seconds to do that. But here I am, I'm in this awesome ship, fitted with 1400s, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the damage per second, saying I'm doing like 353 damage. Well, that's 353 damage a second over the course of 17 seconds. So that comes out to a lot of striking power. An absolute massive amount of striking power to the point of where on missions I have one-shot battle cruisers with one gun, because we're firing a short bus clear into and out the other end of a battle cruiser, which is satisfying. I have also done it to 2 other pilots in PvP, specifically an interceptor, when I was on a gate camp and my fleet was upset that I had spec for long range for a gate camp, but yet I was the only person with a kill because I reached out and touched an interceptor that was doing several thousand meters a second at 131 kilometers away. 2 of my 5 guns fired, and he was dead. And shortly thereafter, everyone else, well, we didn't find much. So when you alpha enemy ships off the field, it demoralizes the enemy. I say the Minmatar are the hardest to skill because while it says here that they use projectile weapons only, they also have drones on a large number of their ships, and a good number of their ships are also missile ships, or they're hybrids. The Typhoon can have 6 guns, or 6 missiles, or you can go 6 guns and 2 missiles, or 6 missiles and 2 guns, and just have fun with it. So along projectiles, a good bonus with projectiles is, like missiles, selectable damage. Unlike missiles, it's not all focused into one pot with damage. With missiles, when you pick a Inferno missile that does thermal damage, it does thermal damage only. But if I want to do thermal damage with kinetic, with projectiles, there's 2 of them, a long range and a short range variant of projectile. One projectile heavily hurts your range. The other one, it gives you range. It hits weaker. Both of them do thermal and kinetic. There's an explosive round like that, and there is a EM round like that. They also have a kinetic only round. And then they have a round that does explosive, kinetic, and thermal damage. Depleted uranium. But, you know, depleted uranium, it doesn't shorten your range. It doesn't lengthen your range. And it does a little bit of everything. I kind of like it for a PvP round, because it's not something you can prepare everything for. And then you have drones. Drones are selectable damage, and missiles, again, are selectable damage. So you have all these choices of selecting what kind of damage you want to do on multiple platforms. They don't have any ships set to bonus thing for drones though. They do have ships bonus for missiles though. And their electronic warfare that they love to do is target painting. Target painting will make an enemy ship appear a lot bigger than it is, making it easier to hit. For tanking, it says that they prefer the shield tank in order to keep the vessels fast. Not all the ships are set to shield tank. A Hurricane, for instance, has more low slots than mid slots. It's only got 4 mid slots compared to like 6 or 7 low slots. So, as a PvE setup, player versus environment, going and doing missions with the Hurricane, you want an armor tank. But for PvP setups, people love to use stuff like micro warp drive, invulnerability fields for hardening, and maybe a shield extender and some shield rigs. And then in their low slots, it's dedicated to tracking and to damage. And that's why Hurricanes will tear up someone at 20 kilometers out, because their guns can follow and they will hit. But many of the ships do not have a bonus for shields, or they just don't have the layout like I was saying with the Hurricane. Some shields, like the Tempest battleship, or in order to stay along with the Hurricane, the Cyclone. The Cyclone is the second combat battle cruiser that has more mid slots than low slots. And I think, 1, it's a missile ship. 2, I think it has bonuses to shields. I don't remember for sure. I'm sitting here looking at the same screen you are, and I change ships constantly. Whenever I feel like a change of scenery, I just jump into a new ship. Sometimes I want to be in the enemy ship in an Empire. Sometimes I'm in a pirate ship. Sometimes I'm in Minmatar ship in a Matari. In Minmatar Empire. Or sometimes I'm an Amarian out in Caldari. It just depends on what I feel like. If I want to use lasers or projectiles or what have you. And that covers the hardest race. They're very, very applicable. Faction warfare for these guys. Mostly Amarr Empire. Again, you'll be enemy to Caldari as well. Your ally will be Gallente. If you do missions with these guys, they will often send you against Amarr, sometimes Caldari. And roaming in their space, their combat anomalies, the bulk of their missions, going into their asteroid belts, you will fight the Angel Cartel. These pirates love to get in your face. They're very fast pirates, and they will get up and use autocannons on you. And when they get in range, they can do a lot of damage, but they can be hurt just as bad. Often enough, just for fun, I will change out to a close range combat setup to go against Angels, since they're running my way anyways. So, this is the end of this video. Hope you've learned a lot, that this is not Warcraft. You can pick whatever race you want and learn another race's ships, another race's weapons, go into another race's space, as long as they don't hate you for committing Red Room on their empire. All of the races have their own unique abilities with their ships and their weapons, and you can choose to learn another. One thing about learning another is there are these rare ships that belong to the pirates, and we have a set of ships that belong to the Sisters of Eve too, that aren't pirates. But all these pirate ships, all these faction ships that belong to the pirates and the Sisters of Eve, they require you to know more than one empire's race of ships. And in doing so, these ships are more powerful because not only do you get the bonus for just one race of ships, because you need to have Gallente battleship level 1, but you also need Caldari battleship level 1 in order to fly a Rattlesnake. A Rattlesnake is a ship that belongs to the Guristas pirates, and it is a missile and drone shield boat. And per Gallente battleship, you get drone bonuses. Per Caldari battleship skill, you get missile bonuses. And it can be a very powerful boat doing this. And the Blood Raiders have a ship. They've all got 3 ships actually. The Sancha have a ship. The Angels have ships, very sleek looking ships. The Serpentis have 3 ships. Mordor's Legion now has 3 ships. And the Sisters of Eve, if you want to really get into exploration, every race has a T1 variant for Tech 1 that's used for exploration. And then they have a Tech 2, a more enhanced version for exploration that can cloak. But it's still not good for combat. But then you have these Sisters of Eve. They have a frigate, a cruiser, and a battle cruiser. The frigate and the cruiser can cloak. They're great for combat. I have done level 4 and level 5 combat sites in these things that I have scanned down. I use a Stratios, and it uses lasers and drones, and being extremely well skilled in both skills and piloting ability, I have soloed a level 5 complex and walked away with a lot of money. They can probe, they all got bonuses to probe. The Sisters of Eve battleship can't cloak. Well, it can cloak if you put a normal cloak on it. But the frigate and the cruisers can warp with a covert ops cloak. So no one will ever see you moving around until you land on a station, until you jump through a gate. Other than that, no one will ever see you unless you're hacking something in a site and they scan you down. But the battleship, it's still made to explore. It has smaller a smaller mass than other battleships because they want you to take it into wormholes. And while it doesn't cloak, they re-geared the cloaking towards repair. It is the one battleship with logistics capability to repair your ally ships. So if you want to go and explore in a fleet, the Nestor is the one to do it, because not only will it repair everyone else, it will tank, it will deal damage, it just can't cloak. And also, all these ships have been used in PvP. And people still will PvP with Astros and with Stratios. So if you're looking at learning more than one race of ships, you also might want to look at a set of faction ships that would accompany those races, because not all the races work together for ships. I think the Amarr and Minmatar does. I think the Gallente and Amarr are SOE ships. Gallente and Minmatar are Angels. Caldari and Gallente are Guristas. Caldari, there's no Caldari and Minmatar. There's no Caldari and Minmatar. People are wanting that one. So let's see. Angels are Gallente and Minmatar. Blood Raiders are Minmatar and Amarr. Sancha are Amarr and Caldari. Guristas are Caldari and Gallente. Printis is Gallente and Minmatar. Mordu, I haven't looked too heavily at their ships, but that's because their ships are PvP. But none of the ships make use of a Minmatar and Caldari union. So, if you think that you're going to train Caldari and Minmatar and get into a good ship, or if you think you're going to train, I don't know what else, but you will want to look at your ship tree first before you go jumping into it. So this is the end of this first tutorial tool video. I have hoped that you learned something about the races, about standings, weapons, how to tank your ships. I see many alphas fitting ships for missions and dying horribly. And when I see the ship that they died in, it's like, you have warp stabilizers in a mission, and you have no way to repair your ship, and you expect to survive without repair. Or you mix guns. Don't mix guns, people. Mixed guns hurt. If you mix your guns, you will never apply the same damage anywhere. I have seen people use small railguns with slightly larger railguns, like 75mm railguns mixed with 150 railguns. The size of the gun, even though they're both small guns, differs their range even if you use the same ammo, because they all have different power settings, basically. Meanwhile, I've seen people worry about using autocannon. Half their fit is autocannon, half their fit is artillery, because they're worried about something getting in close. Stay with one gun, one set of guns, one size of guns, and develop a flight tactic around that gun use. If you have long-range guns, fly away from the enemy fleet. Shoot at them, make them come to you, and keep flying. If you have close-range guns, then you develop your tactics to fly in as fast as you can, avoid as much damage as possible while flying in, and gun your enemy down. And if you're an armor tank, armor repair, don't shield tank for missions. If you're a shield tank, don't try and armor repair a Caldari ship. It just don't work. I have seen these things happen. Equipped repair modules based on the size of your ship. Do not dual repair tank. I have seen people with armor tanks, armor repairs, shield repairs, and hull repairs. And it just does not work. So with this being the end of our video, you can leave comments down below the video for me to read. Leave me ideas that I may forget to cover. If it's something I haven't thought of and you brought something up, then hey, this person gave us this idea to cover in a video, then we'll cover it in a future video. And I really hope that this has been somewhat entertaining and that you've learned something and that it helps you out in EVE. So until the next video, fly safe, have fun, and don't get shot at too much.